We often assume that the older you get, the more mature you become. But that's not necessarily true. It doesn't guarantee that you learn from it. You can spend 20 years making the same mistake and call it experience. You can go through heartbreak after heartbreak and still not understand yourself. You can have arguments with dozens of people and never learn how to properly communicate. So, what actually makes someone mature? Is it the amount of life they've lived or what they've learned from living it? Because maybe experience and maturity aren't the same thing. Experience isn't the same as learning. Experience is exposure to life. You get older, you lose people, you fall in love, you lose jobs, you lose all of these things. All of these give you experience. But experience itself is neutral. You can experience something without understanding it. For example, someone gets cheated on. That's an experience. But afterwards, they might say, everyone is untrustworthy. They've experienced betrayal, but they don't necessarily gain maturity. They may simply develop a new belief from an old wound. See, maturity is integration. And this is where it gets interesting. Maturity isn't simply knowing more, being able to integrate, it's being able to integrate what you've experienced into the way you live. You experience betrayal, you learn discernment. Experience failure, you learn humility. You experience success and you learn responsibility. You experience rejection and you learn that rejection doesn't necessarily define your worth. And I go over this in a few of my previous videos, why your why your emotions aren't the problem. I touch on that as well in there. Your experiences becomes wisdom that changes your behavior, and that's maturity. Experience can actually make you less mature because we naturally assume more experience equals more mature, but that's not true. Experience can reinforce bad patterns. Someone can repeatedly get into toxic relationships and conclude that's just how relationships are. They've accumulated the experience, but they've accumulated the same lesson repeatedly without examining it. So, experience without reflection can become repetition, and repetition isn't necessarily growth. Maturity requires self reflection, and this is the bridge between the two. You don't mature simply because something happened. You mature when you ask, what does this experience reveal about me? Not just what did they do to me, but how did I respond? Why did I tolerate it? What did I believe? What would I do differently now? That's where experience starts becoming wisdom. But Maturity is not the absence of emotion. Like I said, this relates to the previous video where I mentioned um, why your emotions aren't the problem. A mature person isn't someone who never gets angry, jealous, hurt, insecure, or afraid. That's impossible. Maturity is being able to feel something without allowing the feeling to dictate your entire response. You can be angry and still choose your words carefully. You can be hurt and still avoid revenge. You can be afraid and still make the necessary decision. You can be disappointed without turning disappointment into bitterness. And that right there is maturity. Maturity means taking responsibility for your response. You don't control everything that happens to you, but you have increasing you have increasing responsibility for what you do with what happens to you. Two people can experience the same event and come out completely different. One becomes bitter, the other becomes wiser. The event wasn't different. However, the interpretation and the response were. And age doesn't automatically reduce maturity as well, because, we automatically assume that people who are older are wiser or are more mature. Time passes, yes, but it doesn't automatically equal growth. Getting older gives you more opportunities to mature, yes, but it doesn't guarantee that you will. And that's why sometimes you'll meet someone young who possesses incredible emotional maturity, and someone much older who still handles conflict like a teenager. Because age measures, oh, age measures time. Maturity measures adaptation. And this here is the ultimate distinction. Experience asks, what have you been through? Maturity asks, what did you become because you went through it? And that's the central question. Because eventually, life is going to give you all of these experiences, whether it be heartbreak, failure, success, loss, rejection, responsibility, conflict. The difference isn't whether we experience them, the difference is whether they change us for the better. You don't become mature when life stops hurting you. You become mature when you stop requiring life to be different before you can respond differently. And I think that's a great note to end the video on. Perfect note to end the video on, actually. I think that's all for me. I'm going to sign out. And just remember, like the phoenix, we always rise again.